Let me tell you a little bit about it. This is my self-help cosmic horror hybrid. Yeah, so it's self-help. It's set in the 1990s in the Baltimore area. And the whole book is actually a presentation as if it's not only takes place in the 1990s, but as if it's from the 1990s. So it's been written from the point of view of a writer in the 1990s. And the cover here is based off of a real corporate manual called The Organized Executive. If you ever Google it or look it up, you will see that it looks very similar to this. And then of course the title is a play on the famous self-help title, which is a really terrible book. In preparation to write this, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People. I can't remember the name. He has such a generic name. I forget the name of that author. But anyway, the 1920s version of that book does not hold up at all. Problematic. I'll just say one word: problematic. And anyway, yeah, How to Kill Friends and Eviscerate People. If anyone's interested in picking up a copy after the reading or any other time, feel free to come up and say hi to me and introduce myself. I know several of you have a copy of it already. Thank you so much. Thanks again for coming to Normals. I do not feel like it's an overstatement to say that I am honored to be here today in this space, here in the Red Room, as part of the Baltimore Book Festival. So let's just get cracking. This is chapter 6, and it's called Paper Cuts. Seated with one leg over the other and arms crossed, Laird Ott looked uncomfortable. Stacks of paper surrounded him, piling in trays, arranged in haphazard piles across his desk, and even edging out from atop the many filing cabinets crowding his 7th floor office. The papers didn't bother him, though. Supposedly, he thrived in chaos. Though he understood little of how to decorate or maintain a workspace in any aesthetically pleasing sense, he still put much thought into the area's appearance. See, such disarray had been designed to give an impression of constant busyness to any passers-by. Of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Laird's entire department barely did anything, and everyone at KLR knew it. Perhaps that was what bothered him. Who can know for sure? Either way, he decided to stand and walk to his office doorway and then lean through it. Paggi, he said to his assistant, who sat at her own tidy desk filling out check requests. Before he'd said her name, she looked relatively comfortable, but now sat bolt upright and alert. Laird speaking at all, on any topic, could very well portend a bad afternoon, which she'd know better than anyone. What is it, Laird? While his eyes remained unemotional and quasi-predatory, he crossed his arms again, and he made a weird half-smile, half-frown, smooshing his lips together. Say, I have an idea. From now on, why don't you call me Mr. Ott? Don't you think that sounds nicer, more professional? The way he said it walked a tightrope between jest and seriousness. It was a joke with a taunting, domineering edge, delivered with a weaselly lack of confidence. Patty tried reorienting in a semi-productive direction. Can I help you? Can you help me? Why, yes, suppose you may be able to. We'll see. To begin, Patty, sometimes I feel that you and I struggle to communicate, and I wonder why that is. He dragged over a nearby rolling chair and sat. Patty took a deep breath and set down the pen she'd been using, and for some reason, Laird reached across her and picked it up, and he smiled at it as if privately amused. You see, he started, last week I took the time, quite a lot of time in fact, to explain that whenever we receive the TPS report from another department, we need to make 2 copies of the cover sheet, not 1. The first is to be filed along with the report, and the second is to be stored in the cover sheet filing system. I know, Laird. Now his voice registered in tone, bordering on the girlish. Do you know? Because when I checked earlier this morning, I noticed none of the cover sheets from the previous week had been filed in. I'm working on it. She gestured around the main office in which she sat, full of trays and inboxes which themselves were crammed full of information request forms. But ever since you added these extra regulations to our filing system, everything takes twice as long, he muttered. If you aren't able to do your job, Patty stood up suddenly while he remained seated. Now, Laird, I'm perfectly capable of doing my job, she said. The only thing holding me back is you. And if you care about the filing system so much, why don't you help me for once instead of complaining and micromanaging everything? That shocked him. Perhaps Patty had never spoken up for herself like that to him. Perhaps nobody had. He rapped his knuckles twice on her desk, hard enough that the leaves of her potted plants bristled. Okay, good talk, Patty, good talk. We'll circle back to this next week once you've had some time to review. He wheeled his chair away from her and took a single step away, and she murmured, "You're a sucky boss." That stopped him. He took a breath to compose himself, but wheeled back in her direction. Did you have something else you wanted to add, Patty? Though there was a single tear in her eye, she wiped it off and didn't stutter as she raised her voice. "You're not a good boss, Laird. Nobody thinks so. You're an asshole." Heat crept into his face, and he raised his voice to match hers. On the off chance any of the other division's employees eavesdropped, Laird wouldn't want to be heard not cutting back at her. "Sorry if I hurt your feelings by giving you feedback, but that's my specialty, and it's why they pay me the big bucks. Managing you people is, it's taken years off my life, you know that? It's 2 cover sheets, got it? Not 1, 2. He stormed out of the suite and down the hall in the direction of someone else to bother. When he got to the main section of the floor, he found it unusually empty. The cubicles were cleared out. No little groups chatted about must-see TV near the water cooler. The copier was unattended and dormant, and no one was clicking or keystroking, and the warbling desk phones could not be heard. This unusual quiet must have struck him. Nonetheless, he sat at the front desk and sorted through files. This, apparently, was what he did to relax when he thought nobody was there to watch him. Of course, someone was watching him. Closely. It was me. And I turned the corner of the office to greet him. "Hi, Laird." He startled, not having heard me stride with my unusually light step. Perhaps he noticed some new twinkle in my eye, or my relaxed, confident demeanor. "I'm afraid I have some bad news, Laird, buddy." "Oh yeah? What's that?" "I need to request some data from your department." "Aha, I see. Well, that's a very big ask, but I'm here to help." He spun around and walked his rolling chair towards the steel cabinets across the aisle. From one of them, he produced a pile of complicated forms, which he placed on the desk in front of me. "What I'll need from you," he informed me, "is to fill out..." "Oh, I already did that." It made sense that my suddenly holding a huge stack of paper surprised Laird. I hadn't been before. He grabbed my papers, licked a finger, and started to inspect them for mistakes, one after the other, and I beheld as his cynicism transformed to curiosity, then to something adjacent to awe. "You did all this work, Jenny? You even managed to fill out Form B35 properly? Even my own staff struggles with that one." "Of course they do," I said. "It's unclear whether the field is redundant to C64. He smacked his lips and swallowed as if suddenly dehydrated. I said, "So I just went ahead and filled out both sets accurately and recommended a clarification." Incredulous, he flipped through the sheets in search of the offending field, but his fingers moved haphazardly, a little too hasty, and one of the sheets made a razor-thin cut in the uppermost skin crease of his pointer finger. He cursed at the ensuing tiny frown that puckered open on his flesh. It was a deep, and from the way he winced, appeared quite painful. Out of that injury emerged a bead of crimson, and it popped into a trickle. Laird stuffed the finger into his mouth like a little boy, or a vampire. He then utilized a nearby Kleenex as makeshift gauze. He navigated his rolling chair to another desk and opened one of its drawers with his uninjured hand. From that drawer, he produced a new sizable stack of forms. Thank you for taking the time to properly fill out the paperwork, Jenny. It took no time at all. Right. Anyway, just this week, just today, in fact, my department saw fit to institute new requirements that clarify any data requests. The bad news, one might say, Jenny, is that there's additional paperwork. A lot, in fact. The good news, however, is that my team will have a better, clearer understanding of your needs, and all of us here at KLR will work towards a mutual understanding of how data plays a function in all of our roles. Dear reader, I did not slouch, I did not sigh. The smile on my face remained frozen like the Mona Lisa. I extended my hands, gestured with my fingers. No problem, Laird, I intoned. Hand him my way, big boy. Literally anyone else, including myself, would have reamed him out, which is why my utter nonchalance unnerved him. When he placed the papers in my hands, I felt him relax at having diverted me from forcing him to do anything helpful in the moment. Second stack in hand, I turned 180 degrees on my heels. Then I closed my eyes, and I used my omniscient vision, and I observed as Laird leaned back and assumed that the day's battle was won. And I opened my eyes, and I turned once more, completing a circle. And I placed the papers before him. All finished, I said. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. He grabbed the forms in a frenzy, and his breathing turned ragged and dog-like as he flipped through them. No, this is impossible. I just gave these to you. Did you just sneak in here beforehand and fill these all out? Jenny, how did you? The forms consumed his entire vision, one sheet after the other with checked check boxes, fields filled full of accurate number strings and data tallied through page-length tables, all hand-printed in attractive and flawlessly legible handwriting. His lack of composure resulted in a second nasty paper cut, deeper, longer, and this time he cried in pain. Jenny, how are you doing this? He shouted, his fresh cuts oozing red. Perhaps he deserved a response, but if I'd supplied it, would he really understand? Either way, by the time he looked up, I disappeared, and he was once again the solitary occupant of the vast 7th floor. Now, I must speak about building your costume, my friends, before we return to Laird. Now, I disappeared, but where did I go? Why, I started through the lobby towards KLR's carousel-style entrance and exit. As high noon with its scarce shade approached, I slipped on my sunglasses. I marched through the baking parking lot, hopped in the van, and piloted it through traffic at reckless speeds, weaving down York Road to my favorite destination, the Towson Town Mall. The mall is where I go to clear my mind, to refresh myself, to rejuvenate, and in the case of that day, to entirely reinvent my image. What better symbol of hope and commercial transformation exists in America than the mall? A sanitized, air-conditioned marketplace where consumers of all ages and most races and some creeds max out their credit cards to become more closely aligned in appearance to the ideal images they've painted of themselves within their minds. Many of my favorite memories transpired at the mall. When Catherine, my daughter, was little, we'd go after school. If she got an A on a test or report card, I'd take her to KB Toys, and she'd pick out whatever Barbie she wanted. She loved it, but I treasure those experiences more than any doll. That day, I visited first the luminous Hecht's department store, where I selected a pair of square-toe, laced-up Ralph Lauren high heels. I then strolled into the mall proper and stopped in at the Banana Republic, purchasing a wide-shouldered women's two-piece that cost a pretty penny. I strutted from that store in my new garments. Each of them were black as a raven's eye. But my brownish blonde hair with its boring bangs presented a problem, so I marched up to Sally's Styles on the top floor. I had no appointment, but as luck would have it, a spot opened the exact moment I set foot within the establishment. The hairdresser ushered me into one of the hydraulic styling chairs, then listened dutifully to my request. That's quite the big change, exclaimed my platinum blonde stylist as she chewed her pungent bubblicious, and I don't know what voice that was, I'm just winging it here, folks. I don't know if this hairdressers sound like that. No streaks, no highlights? You sure you want it all the way? Just as I said, I repeated, grinning at my own reflection in the salon's oval mirror. No variations in the color, just the darkest black your dye can produce, and a haircut, like Meg Ryan's. Why do appearances matter? More than intellect, wit, or moral standing, in our relationships with strangers and loved ones alike, appearances matter above all else. Your appearance includes your physical fitness, your posture, your grooming, and most importantly, your costume. According to scientific studies undergone at Johnston Research, perfecting these elements of your outward appearance allows you to A, lie more convincingly to others, and because attractive people are considered 77% more trustworthy. Attract the weak-willed and the simpering is point number B, who suffer from low self-esteem and frequently seek out and obey leaders. Then, of course, the third point is your appearance makes an outward show of your material wealth, as most people envy and respect those who have the time and money to attend to how they look for hours every day. But it's not as simple as purchasing the most expensive and flattering clothing, although doing so is mandatory. If you are to have any value to others, you must also consider your brand. That's right. Just as chain restaurants and sneaker manufacturers and arms dealers sink significant resources into crafting their images, you too must begin building yourself up as a brand. And you must pay vigilant attention to it every time you leave the house, and most times you're inside of it. If it helps, pretend a tiny video camera follows you and everyone you know, everywhere you go, always. Imagine that. And that it records everything you do, and it magically projects all of this information in images and videos out into the world, magically. It's never too late to invent your brand. Walking through the mall that day, I appeared to its occupants at first as a bland, woman-shaped lump of careerism. I needed to fit in with the crowd so hard that I'd ended up looking like nothing at all. But when I exited from Sally Styles, and after a hasty pit stop at the Hot Topic, I emerged as a dark queen of supernatural warfare. My shoes, suit, artfully tousled hair, even my lips and eyebrows, all were the dark and shiny shade of murder. Fun fact, in 1995 alone, American corporations spent $163 billion in advertising. Now, follow the paper trail. You may be wondering what's going on with Laird back at KLR. Don't worry, I've been keeping close watch. You forget, I had developed extraordinary powers for multitasking, and today I was busy. So much remained undone. When I sat behind the wheel of my van contemplating my new ride, I also watched as Laird stalked around his office to fulfill my request. This led him into the fabled filing cabinet complex, a massive, walled-off room in which only certain of his division members were allowed. The area featured no windows, and one needed to squint to see very far in the light provided by the overhead hanging lamps. Towering cabinets lined long aisles that stretched every direction into cavernous darkness. So narrow were the aisles, they couldn't provide space enough for two to walk side by side, but that was no matter, for Laird was alone. He hummed an anxious tune, and his heels clicked on the hard linoleum floor. Unexpectedly, a frigid gust of wind blew through, and some of the pages he'd carried got caught up in the draft. He must have wondered if the HVAC system had surged, and as he bent over to snatch the fallen sheets, he heard something unusual, the tiny, unmistakable creaking of one of the nearby cabinet drawers opening without any human aid. A single piece of paper emerged from one of the cabinets, as if drawn forth by an invisible hand. It lingered in the stale air, then flitted with unnatural grace in his direction. The sight hypnotized him, but if he'd turn and looked around, he'd notice another cabinet drawer opening behind him, and another piece of paper becoming withdrawn. This phenomenon occurred all around him, and the various sheets hovered and danced in a secret choreography. The floating sheets turned One of them faced him diagonally, downward, and then, in a straight line, it descended. It whipped around Laird's arm, fusing with the cloth of his shirt sleeve and rolling around his forearm with a vice-like grip. The piece that hovered behind Laird darted around his head, and as an overdue scream emerged, it stifled it. It slapped itself across his mouth and nose, and it sealed in his wail. Per my specifications, his eyes remained unobstructed. The mean-spirited papers looked normal, in the visual sense, yet their normality could not be verified by his tongue. It tried puncturing a hole, but found the durability of this evil worksheet quite strong, with the tactile quality closer to that of rubbery skin. More assaulted Laird, each gluing itself to his arms and legs. With terrific strength, they pulled the squirming bureaucrat down the central aisle. Oh, he tried fighting. He inaudibly cursed and gnashed. But no amount of thrashing on his part could delay my ministrations. The shackles of stationery dragged him down a bend in the wall of cabinets, and then another, and then deeper into the shadowy filing cabinet complex than it had ever been before. At the long aisle's very distant end stood a cabinet that neither Laird nor any other living human being had ever witnessed before. It awaited his arrival. The real secret to supernatural torment. In a minute, dear reader, I'll share this secret with you, and I urge you to use it wisely. I say, with great seriousness, that much effort is wasted on ordinary, pedestrian murder. In order to exact retribution, you must tap into the deep well of subconscious fear. Fear is formless. It is nameless. I remember how, as a 5-year-old girl, a seemingly simple nightmare came to rule my days and render the prospect of sleep terrifying. The nightmare consisted of me walking downstairs within my kindergarten. It wasn't exactly my kindergarten, mind you. The rooms were too big and too empty, containing no desks nor chairs. Faint whispers of children could be heard from the otherwise silent ducts, and the walls were crammed full of clocks whose faces bore no hands or numbers. In this dream I walked alone, but often turned to check if any pursuers were behind me. Without any sense of goal or destination, I found myself pushing through a heavy door and entering a yawning, concrete stairwell. And, placing my hand along the grimy rail, I descended. I went down, and at the base stood only a small, child-sized door. One that an adult would need to crouch to fit through. It was painted red. Somehow I understood it was unlocked and that it led to somewhere horrible. I understood nothing else about it, but the door inspired within me not trepidation, nor mere nervousness, but real fear. What this door concealed was a force absent of life, of love, was a quivering, pulsating presence that suffocated my heart and polluted me with toxic, mind-altering dread. This force would never open the door. It would never pounce, nor ensnare me in its sticky tendrils. All it would do is wait, and wait as long as it would take, into adulthood, perhaps, or into my final moments, prostrate in my deathbed, for the day to come when I chose to tell this door, I am ready for you to open. All the next week when I tried explaining, the adults only laughed. They patted me on the head and informed me from their hideous mouths that nightmares aren't real. The adults were impotent to make sense of that horrific and very real sensation caused by the presence that I knew lived beyond that little red door. That is the feeling you must cause in your enemies. You must return them to childhood and remove their sense of logic and coherence, so they once again wet the proverbial bed. You must punish them for assuming the universe organizes itself around them, or is organized at all. You must transport them to the nightmare realm. The cabinet stood on its own, opposite from Laird on the other side of the aisle. I fabricated it from the same substance as that of my erstwhile nightmare door, and it likewise appeared quite small, like an item from the world's most depressing children's playset. The papers released from Laird's arms and legs and mouth. A single sheet of them fell to his feet, and it dropped, as if dropped from the ceiling. It was one of the sheets I'd filled out for him earlier that day, and the data it requested, it said, would be located, well, straight ahead. Laird trembled. The little red filing cabinet captured his attention like a monument intruding upon our world from an alien plane of existence. He knew he needed to access it. Drawing closer, he perhaps perceived it to be not built of any familiar substance. Its structure was rigid like steel, and yet it quivered. It was a quivering steel. The steel of the cabinet quivered with anticipation. The little cabinet was hungry. Its bottom drawer opened in greeting, friendly as a handshake. Come forward, it seemed to say. Everything you seek is inside of my mouth. Laird stepped forward as if approaching a canyon, and he gazed into the tunnel within that monstrous cabinet. It revealed no mere enclosure for filing cabinets, for filing folders, but an inky darkness that swallowed the dim overhead lights. Now Laird really doubted where his career had taken him, but as he turned to abscond, the same papers he'd trusted his entire life, they acted as a collective and formed a wall behind him. In a desperate move, Laird threw himself into it, but he failed to break through to the other side. Its rubbery, sticky surface urged him backwards, toward an uncertain destiny. Desperate for a clue, his attention became fixated on the cabinet's open maw. Wordlessly, it beckoned. As he bent closer to peer into the darkness, he found the cabinet had grown. Or perhaps he'd shrunk? In either case, the sides scraped painfully along the drawer's jagged edges as he was pushed in. First went his feet, and he received the impression that they were no longer in this world. They were in a bad place, where the rest of him would soon join. The same sensation occurred for his pelvis, his torso, and his arms, and his wrinkly neck. Eventually, his whole body arrived at a location where there existed nothing. Nothing besides darkness and dirty fingers. Thanks.